The alien leader barked, "End the kid." The honey badger growled, "Start with me." Part 1. The alarm screamed through the corridors of the colony ship Perseverance, but it was already too late. Chief Engineer Carlos Martinez felt the hull breach before the sensors confirmed it. After 30 years of working on ships, you learned to feel when something was wrong. The slight change in air pressure, the way the deck plates hummed differently, the taste of recycled air turning just a bit stale. Something had punched through their outer hull. "Engineering report." Captain's voice crackled over the intercom, tense but controlled. Martinez was already moving toward the console, his fingers flying over the controls. The screen showed him everything he needed to know, and none of it was good. "Captain, we've got multiple breaches on Deck 7. Breaches are too clean, too precise. This isn't debris damage." There was a pause. Martinez could hear muffled sounds in the background of the bridge, voices raised in alarm. Then the captain spoke again, and this time her voice was different, harder. "We're being boarded. Get everyone to the cargo bay. Move now." Martinez didn't waste time asking questions. He hit the emergency channel that reached every crew member and colonist on the ship. "This is Chief Martinez. All personnel to cargo bay 2. This is not a drill. Move quickly and quietly. Families with children go first." He grabbed the emergency kit from under his workstation, checked that his personal beacon was active, and headed for the door. The engineering bay was deep in the ship, which meant he had a longer run than most. He could already hear the sounds echoing through the corridors. Sharp, barking voices speaking in a language his translator struggled to process. The heavy thud of armored boots on metal decking. The occasional burst of energy weapons firing. Martinez moved through the familiar passages, directing confused colonists toward the cargo bay as he went. Most of these people were farmers, teachers, scientists. They'd signed up to build a new life on a colony world, not to face whatever was tearing through their ship. He saw the fear in their eyes, the way parents clutched their children close, and something cold settled in his gut. The colony ship had been damaged 3 days ago when a micrometeor strike took out their main engine and half their shield generators. They'd been limping toward the nearest station, hopping to make repairs. The captain had sent out distress signals, but help was still 2 days away. Whoever was attacking them had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Martinez reached the cargo bay and found it already filling with people. Families huddled together in small groups. The ship's small security team stood near the entrances, their weapons ready but their faces showing they knew how badly this could go. The Perseverance wasn't a military vessel. It had 6 security officers with light arms meant to break up the occasional drunk fight or handle minor disputes. Against a real boarding action, they were nearly useless. Captain stood near the center of the bay, her dark face composed but her eyes constantly scanning, evaluating. She caught sight of Martinez and moved toward him. "How bad?" she asked quietly. "Bad, they hit us in 3 places simultaneously. Professional job, military precision." Martinez kept his voice low. "We're not dealing with pirates." The captain said, and the word tasted like ash. "I got a glimpse of them on the security feeds before they cut the cameras. Full combat armor, military-grade weapons. This is a raid." Martinez felt his jaw tighten. Everyone in settled space knew about They were one of the elder species, members of the Galactic Council, supposedly civilized. But out here in the frontier, away from the core worlds where the Council could watch, they sometimes showed their true nature. Humans were new to the galactic community, still proving themselves. Ships like the Perseverance were vulnerable, and they knew it. "How long until help arrives?" Martinez asked. 48 hours. Might as well be 48 years. The main door to the cargo bay exploded inward with a blast of superheated plasma. Screams filled the air as people scrambled backward, away from the sudden breach. Through the smoke and debris, figures emerged. Tall, easily 7 feet, covered in segmented armor that gleamed dully under the emergency lights. Their heads were angular, almost canine, with eyes that reflected light like a predator's. Had arrived. There were at least 15 of them, maybe more behind. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who knew they'd already won. Their weapons tracked across the crowd, and the translator units on their armor began speaking in harsh, mechanically rendered standard. Remain still. You are prisoners of the supremacy. Cooperation will ensure survival. Resistance will not be tolerated. One of them stepped forward, larger than the others, with markings on his armor that suggested rank. His helmet retracted, revealing a face that was indeed canine in structure but wrong in the way nightmares were wrong. Too many teeth, eyes too intelligent and too cold. "I am Commander," the alien said, his voice a deep rumble that the translator rendered into flat, emotionless words. "This vessel is now property. You are cargo, valuable cargo, but cargo nonetheless. You will be evaluated. Those with useful skills will be sold to labor contractors. The rest will be processed as the market demands." Martinez felt the crowd around him shift, the fear becoming something else. These people understood what was being said. They were being taken as slaves. In the 27th century, humanity had thought such things were ancient history. Apparently, the galaxy had different ideas about civilization. Captain stepped forward. "This is a civilian vessel under the protection of." Moved faster than something that big had any right to move. His armored hand struck the captain across the face, sending her sprawling. "You do not speak unless given permission." Two of the security officers raised their weapons. They didn't even get a shot off. Plasma bolts took them both down, their bodies crumpling to the deck. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. The message was clear. Martinez helped the captain to her feet. Blood ran from her split lip, but her eyes were still defiant. He could see her calculating, trying to find some way out of this. But there wasn't one. They were outmatched and trapped in their own cargo bay. Began walking among the prisoners, examining them like livestock. He would stop occasionally, tap someone with his weapon, and his soldiers would pull that person out of the crowd. A young man with medical training. A woman who'd been the ship's systems analyst. An older man who'd been a terraform engineer, taking the useful ones first. Then's eyes fell on a small boy, maybe 8 years old, who stood with his mother near one of the cargo containers. The child was crying, trying to muffle the sound against his mother's side. She held him close, whispering urgently in his ear, trying to calm him. The commander stopped, his head tilted in a gesture that might have been curiosity in a human but seemed more predatory on him. He walked toward the mother and child. "Your offspring is defective," said. "Weak, crying, no market value." The mother's face went pale. She understood what was coming before the words left the alien's mouth. "Please," she whispered. "He's just scared. He'll be quiet, I promise." Human emotional responses are tedious. Raised his sidearm, the barrel pointing directly at the child's head. The boy looked up, his tear-streaked face frozen in terror. He couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. Just a kid who'd been excited about seeing a new world, who'd probably spent the last 3 days playing with the other children, while the adults worried about engine repairs. The cargo bay went silent. Even the other soldiers seemed to pause, some of them shifting uncomfortably. This was cold even by their standards. His finger moved toward the trigger. His voice carried across the bay with absolute authority. "End the kid." But before the weapon could discharge, Martinez moved. He didn't think about it, didn't plan it. Thinking would have reminded him that he was 53 years old, that his knees ached in the morning, that he was an engineer, not a soldier. Thinking would have told him this was suicide. He simply stepped between the commander and the child. Martinez wasn't a large man. 5'10", stocky from years of working in tight engineering spaces. His coveralls were stained with grease and coolant. His hands were from 100 small burns and cuts. He had in his hair and lines around his eyes. By any measure, he was unremarkable. But something in the way he stood there, arms slightly out from his sides, weight balanced on the balls of his feet, made pause. The commander lowered his weapon slightly, head tilting again in that predatory gesture. "You wish to plead for the offspring?" asked, and there was amusement in his voice. The translator couldn't quite capture it, but Martinez heard it in the underlying tone. Martinez met the alien's eyes. His voice was quiet, calm, with a weight to it that seemed to drop the temperature in the bay. "Start with me." The words hung in the air. Behind Martinez, the child's mother had pulled her son back, scrambling away from the confrontation. The other colonists were frozen, watching. Even Captain stood still, her eyes wide. Stared at Martinez for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound, and his soldiers joined in. The translator rendered it as laughter, but it sounded more like the noise predators made before the kill. "Brave little human," said. He raised his weapon again, this time pointing it at Martinez's chest. "Your courage is noted. It will not save you." Martinez didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, his eyes locked on the commander, and in those eyes something burned that made laughter die away. The alien's finger tightened on the trigger. Part 2. The plasma bolt never hit Martinez. He moved at the exact moment fired, diving not away from the weapon, but toward a stack of cargo containers to his left. The superheated plasma struck a compressed oxygen tank mounted on the wall behind where he'd been standing. The explosion wasn't huge, not enough to breach the hull or cause serious structural damage, but in the enclosed space of the cargo bay, it was enough. The tank ruptured with a sharp crack, releasing its contents in a violent rush. Fire bloomed where the plasma had superheated the metal. Smoke and steam filled the air, alarms screaming their warnings. Martinez hit the deck rolling, came up behind a cargo pallet, and his hands found what he'd seen when he'd first entered the bay. A piece of hull plating that had been removed for maintenance before the attack, sitting next to a toolkit. The plating was roughly 2 feet long, jagged on one end where it had been cut, heavy enough to serve as both shield and weapon. They were shouting now, their voices harsh and barking through the smoke. They had thermal imaging in their helmets, but the sudden explosion had saturated their sensors. Martinez could hear them moving, trying to regroup, trying to find targets. He moved through the smoke like a ghost, staying low, using cargo containers for cover. His heart hammered in his chest, adrenaline singing through his veins. Part of his mind was screaming at him, telling him this was insane, that he was going to die. But that part was small and distant. The rest of him was focused with an intensity he'd never felt before. A soldier emerged from the smoke to his right, weapon sweeping in an arc. Martinez didn't hesitate. He swung the hull plating like a club, putting his full weight behind it. The jagged edge caught the alien in the neck joint, where the armor segments met. It was the weakest point in their combat suits, designed to allow head movement. The sharp metal punched through. They made a wet, gurgling sound and went down. Martinez grabbed the soldier's rifle as he fell, nearly dropping it because the weapon was designed for larger hands. But he'd spent 30 years learning to use tools that weren't quite right for the job. You adapted. You made it work. The rifle felt awkward, but the trigger was universal enough. Martinez braced it against his shoulder, aimed at the next shape moving through the smoke, and fired. The plasma bolt took another in the chest. The armor held, but the impact sent the alien stumbling backward. Someone screamed, not one of the colonists. The sound was high-pitched, almost surprised. They hadn't expected resistance, certainly not from humans. "Cargo bay's voice cut through the chaos. "Converge and suppress. Don't damage the valuable assets." Martinez kept moving. He'd created chaos, but chaos was a temporary advantage. There were soldiers, trained and disciplined. They would adapt quickly. He needed to do more than just survive the next 30 seconds. He needed to change the equation entirely. 3 more shapes emerged from the smoke, moving in formation. Professional, trained. Martinez fired the rifle until it clicked empty, managing to hit one of them in the leg. The alien went down and the other two scattered for cover. Then someone else fired. Not a weapon. One of the security officers who'd survived the initial assault had retrieved a weapon from a fallen comrade and was firing from behind the cargo containers where the colonists had taken shelter. The shots were wild, panicked, but they added to the confusion. Martinez discarded the empty rifle and moved again. His engineering mind was working even in the middle of the firefight, cataloging the environment, looking for advantages. The cargo bay had been loaded with supplies for the colony. Food, water, equipment, tools, and chemicals. Lots of chemicals. Fertilizers, cleaning supplies, industrial solvents. He found what he needed near the back wall. A crate of mining explosives, small charges used for breaking rock. They weren't armed, but the detonators were right there, magnetic clamps that would attach to any metal surface. More were pouring into the bay now, called by their commander. Martinez counted at least 20, maybe more. Too many. Way too many. But he wasn't trying to win a straight fight. He was trying to make them understand that this wasn't worth it. He grabbed 3 of the charges, armed them with shaking hands, and looked for the best place to use them. The main power conduit ran along the ceiling, feeding the bay's systems. If he could blow that, the emergency bulkheads would seal automatically, trapping whoever was in here and cutting off reinforcements. Martinez threw the first charge. His arm, weakened by age and too much time in zero-G maintenance crawls, didn't give it enough distance. The charge fell short, detonating against a cargo container instead. The explosion was sharp, contained, but it sent shrapnel flying. He heard a scream. The second charge was better. He scrambled up onto a container, used the height advantage, and hurled the explosive toward the ceiling. It stuck to the power conduit with a magnetic thunk. 5 seconds until detonation. Martinez dove off the container, hit the deck hard enough to knock the wind from his lungs, and covered his head. The explosion ripped through the conduit. Sparks rained down and the bay lights died. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow. More importantly, the bulkheads began to close, heavy blast doors sliding shut with a grinding mechanical sound. "Stop those doors!" His voice was no longer amused. It was angry now, with an edge of something that might have been concern. "Get them open." But Martinez had already moved to the door controls and fried them with a burst from a captured plasma pistol. The doors locked in place, sealing the bay. Not all that had made it inside. Maybe half of them were trapped in here with the colonists. The rest were cut off outside. In the sudden relative quiet, Martinez could hear his own breathing. Ragged, painful. He looked down and realized he was bleeding from at least 3 places. Shrapnel from the explosions had caught his left arm and right leg. A plasma shot had grazed his ribs, burning through his coveralls and leaving an angry red welt across his side. He hurt, everything hurt, but the pain was distant, unimportant. He still had 1 charge left and he still had work to do. The in the bay were regrouping, using the cargo containers for cover just like the humans. But now the situation was different. They were trapped in here. Their reinforcements couldn't get through the sealed bulkheads, and they had to be careful not to damage their valuable assets. Martinez made his way toward where the colonists had gathered, moving from cover to cover. Spotted him and fired. The plasma bolt missed, melting a hole in a water storage tank. The water began gushing out, adding to the chaos on the floor. When Martinez reached the colonists, he found Captain waiting. Her face was grim but determined. 3 of the male colonists were with her, armed with weapons taken from fallen. They weren't soldiers, but they were angry, scared, and willing to fight. "What's the plan?" the captain asked quietly. "Plan?" Martinez almost laughed, but it came out as more of a wheeze. "I'm making this up as I go, but we need to keep them busy. Help is coming. We just need to survive until it gets here." One of the men, a farmer named who'd been bringing his family to the colony world, looked at Martinez with wide eyes. "You're bleeding pretty bad." Later, Martinez checked his captured pistol. Half charged, maybe 10 shots. He looked at the other men. "Can you shoot?" "I can try," said. The other two nodded. "Don't try to be heroes, just make noise. Keep them worried. They're trapped in here same as us, and they don't know how many of us are armed now." Martinez wiped blood from his face. "And keep everyone else behind the cargo containers. Those crates will stop plasma bolts." His voice echoed through the bay. "Humans, you have fought bravely, but this is over. Surrender now and I will spare the offspring. Continue to resist and I will kill everyone younger than 10 standard years." The threat hung in the air. Martinez looked around at the families huddled in the red emergency lighting. At least 20 children in the group, ranging from infants to teenagers. Their parents held them close, fear stark on every face. "He's bluffing," Captain said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe." Martinez checked his pistol again, a nervous gesture, "but I don't think we can risk it." "So what do we do?" Martinez was quiet for a moment, thinking. His engineering mind turned the problem over, looking at it from every angle. Then he remembered something. The cargo bay had two things that the desperately didn't want damaged: the colonists themselves and the cargo. All those supplies represented significant value. That's what this was about, after all. Profit. "We make them choose," Martinez said slowly, "between what they came for and getting out alive." He picked up the last explosive charge and looked at the stacks of cargo around them. Fertilizer, industrial chemicals, fuel cells, all of it stored according to safety protocols, but safety protocols could be if you knew what you were doing, if you didn't care about the consequences. Martinez started moving through the stacks, checking labels, calculating. The other men watched him with growing understanding and horror. "You're going to blow the whole bay," said. "If I have to." Martinez found what he needed: a pallet of fuel cells next to a crate of oxidizing agents. Put them together wrong and you got a very energetic chemical reaction. Put them together on purpose and you got a bomb big enough to turn the entire cargo bay into a crater. He set the charge on the fuel cells, then looked back at the captain. "Get everyone ready to move. When those doors open, we run. Don't stop, don't look back. You'll die. Rather that than let them take us." Martinez armed the charge but didn't set the timer yet. He stood up, cupped his hands around his mouth, and shouted toward where he knew they were positioned. "We need to talk." There was a pause, then the commander's voice came back, cautious now. "What do you want, human?" "I want you to leave. Take your soldiers and go. We'll repair our ship and everyone goes home happy." "That is not acceptable." "Then we all die." Martinez held up the detonator so they could see it in the emergency lighting. "I've rigged this bay to explode. You've got maybe 30 seconds to evacuate before I turn this whole place into vapor. No slaves, no cargo, no profit. Just a lot of expensive debris." The silence that followed was absolute. Martinez could feel everyone's eyes on him. The colonists looked terrified. They looked uncertain. Commander was somewhere in the shadows, calculating. Martinez's hand was steady on the detonator, and in that moment something shifted. They had expected resistance. They'd expected fear, but they hadn't expected this. A human willing to blow himself up, along with everything they'd come for, just to deny them their prize. They'd hunted prey before, but prey that refused to be prey, that was something new. Part 3. The standoff lasted maybe 15 seconds, but it felt like hours. Martinez stood there in the blood-red emergency lighting, his hand on the detonator, bleeding from multiple wounds but somehow still upright. Around him, the colonists held their breath. The soldiers remained frozen behind their cover, weapons trained but fingers off triggers. Finally, Commander emerged from behind a cargo container. His armor was scored in several places, and his posture radiated fury barely held in check. He stared at Martinez with those cold, predatory eyes. "You are bluffing," they said, but there was a question in his voice. Martinez twisted the detonator slightly. The device began emitting a soft beeping sound, counting down. Am I? The beeping was actually meaningless, a proximity alarm from a piece of mining equipment, but they didn't know that. What they did know was that humans were unpredictable. Humans did stupid, suicidal things when cornered. Every elder species in the galaxy had learned that the hard way at some point. His head tilted in that predatory gesture. His translator voice remained flat, but Martinez could hear the anger underneath. If you detonate that charge, you kill your own people. Better dead than slaves. Martinez met the alien's eyes. You think we're weak because we're not warriors. You think we'll just surrender and accept whatever you do to us. But here's something you need to understand about humans. We've been fighting for survival since before we had fire. Every predator on our world tried to eat us. Every disease tried to kill us. Every other human tribe competed for the same resources. We survived all of it because we learned one simple truth. The beeping continued. Martinez's voice dropped lower, harder. We'd rather die on our feet than live on our knees. For a long moment, said nothing. Then he barked an order in his own language, and his soldiers began moving toward the damaged entry door. They moved quickly, professionally, but Martinez could see the way they kept glancing back at him, at the detonator in his hand. The commander was the last to leave. At the door, he turned back. This is not over, human. The supremacy does not forget. Neither do we, Martinez said quietly. Then they were gone, pulling back through the corridors, moving toward their boarding craft. Captain immediately rushed to the bay controls, overriding the lockdown and resealing the main doors properly. The sound of plasma cutters echoed from outside as they extracted themselves from the ship. Martinez's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the deck, still holding the detonator, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fatting. The beeping device fell from his grip and clattered on the metal floor. The farmer picked it up and looked at it. Then he looked at Martinez. This isn't a detonator. I know. You were bluffing. Mostly. Martinez gestured weakly at the explosive charge still sitting on the fuel cells. That part's real enough. If I'd had to, I would have set it off manually. The captain knelt beside him, already pulling medical supplies from an emergency kit. You just bet all our lives on a mining proximity sensor. Didn't see another option. Martinez winced as she started treating his wounds. The pain was coming now, sharp and insistent. Besides, I knew something they didn't. What's that? Humans are crazy. The whole galaxy knows it. They've heard the stories, read the reports. We're the species that climbed to the top of the food chain on a death world by being too stubborn to quit. When a raider looks at a human holding a bomb, he has to wonder if maybe, just maybe, that human is actually crazy enough to use it. The ship shuddered as the boarding craft detached. Through the hull, they could hear the whine of engines as the vessel pulled away. Long-range sensors confirmed what everyone hoped. The raiders were leaving. The child that Martinez had protected came forward then, his mother's hand tight in his. The boy looked up at the engineer with wide eyes. You saved me. Martinez managed a tired smile. You're welcome, kid. Are you going to be okay? I'll live. He hoped that was true anyway. He was bleeding pretty badly and everything hurt. But the medical bay had and captain was already calling for stretchers. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Martinez spent most of it in the medical bay while they worked on his injuries. 3 cracked ribs, a fractured arm, 17 separate lacerations, plasma burns, and a concussion. The doctor, a competent woman named Williams, told him he was lucky to be alive. When he finally woke up properly, Captain was sitting beside his bed. She smiled when she saw his eyes open. Welcome back. You've been out for about 30 hours. Martinez tried to sit up, failed, settled for turning his head. The ship. Limping along. Engineering team patched the worst of the damage. We should make it to the station. She paused. The patrol found us 6 hours ago. They escorted the vessel to the border and made it very clear that any more raids would result in military action. Good. Martinez, what you did. I did what anyone would have done. No, the captain's voice was firm. You did what most people would want to do but wouldn't have the courage for. You stood between a child and a monster, and you didn't blink. Martinez was quiet for a moment. I couldn't let him hurt that kid. My daughter was about that age once. Long time ago now, but I remember. I remember thinking that if anything ever happened to her, I'd burn the world down to keep her safe. You did more than that. You saved everyone on this ship. We got lucky. Luck is what you make it, Captain Stood. Rest, that's an order. But when you're up and around, the colonists want to thank you properly. They're already talking about putting up a statue or nomming something after you. Please don't, Martinez groaned. I just want to go back to fixing engines. But news travels fast in space, especially news of humans doing something unexpected and dangerous. The story of Chief Engineer Martinez and the raiders spread through the communication networks, bouncing from station to station, ship to ship. By the time the Perseverance limped into dock 3 days later, the incident had already reached the inner worlds. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what they termed the Perseverance incident. Ambassador represented humanity, standing before the assembled species with quiet dignity. The council chamber was ancient, carved from a single asteroid, with each species occupying their designated space, according to traditions older than human civilization. The delegation sat in stony silence as Ambassador presented the evidence. Security footage from the Perseverance showing the attack, the casualties, the attempted execution of a child. The council watched in silence, and even the elder species who generally viewed humans as upstart newcomers seemed troubled by what they saw. Then the footage showed Martinez stepping between the commander and the child, showed his fight through the cargo bay, showed the standoff with the detonator. Ambassador let the footage speak for itself until the very end. Humanity seeks peace, she said, her voice carrying through the chamber's acoustic systems. We have sought it since the day we joined this community. We are colonists, explorers, engineers, and dreamers. We prefer negotiation to conflict, cooperation to competition. We ask only to be left in peace to build our settlements and raise our children. She paused, letting the words sink in. On the screens around the chamber, Martinez's face was frozen in that moment of confrontation, bloodied but defiant. But understand this. Every human you meet carries the same potential you saw in Chief Engineer Martinez. He is not a soldier. He is not enhanced or augmented. He has no special training in combat. He is a 53-year-old mechanic who fixes engines and tells bad jokes. Ambassador's voice hardened. But when you threatened a child, he became something else. We have a word for it in old Earth languages, berserker. We have another phrase, too, from one of our ancient cultures. They called it the honey badger. The ambassador pulled up an image on the screens. An animal from old Earth, small and stocky, with distinctive black and white markings. It looked almost comical compared to the fearsome predators other species brought from there. This animal was small, not the strongest or fastest or deadliest creature on Earth, but it had one quality that made even the biggest predators avoid it. When cornered, when threatened, it simply refused to stop fighting. It didn't care about size or strength or odds. It just fought until nothing was left standing. Our ancestors both feared and admired it. She turned to face the delegation directly. Chief Engineer Martinez is a honey badger, and here is what you need to understand. So is every other human. The teacher who was organizing the children during the attack, honey badger. The farmer who picked up a weapon to defend his family, honey badger. The mother who held her child and looked death in the face without flinching, honey badger. The chamber was absolutely silent. Ambassador's voice softened but lost none of its steel. We want peace. We offer friendship to all who would have it. We will trade, share knowledge, build relationships with any species that approaches us in good faith. But if you come for our children, if you try to make us slaves, if you mistake our preference for peace as weakness, you will discover that underneath the friendly surface, we are all honey badgers. She gestured to the frozen image of Martinez. This man was prepared to die, to kill himself and everyone in that bay, rather than let them be taken. That is not weakness. That is not surrender. That is the human spirit. We would rather burn than break. Ambassador turned to address the full council. Humanity proposes a formal treaty. Leave our ships alone. Leave our colonies alone. Leave our children alone. In return, we will be the peaceful, cooperative species we wish to be. But break that treaty, threaten what we love, and you will find that every one of us becomes something you don't want to face. We don't care how big you are. We don't care about the odds. We just care about protecting our own. Please, for everyone's sake, let us be the peaceful species we wish to be. Because none of us want to see what happens when humanity decides peace is no longer an option. The Galactic Council deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they censured the supremacy, imposed trade restrictions, and assigned monitoring ships to patrol the frontier. More importantly, they issued a formal statement acknowledging that attacks on human vessels would be treated as violations of galactic law. It wasn't a perfect solution. It wouldn't stop every raid or prevent every attack, but it was a message. Humans were not prey. Back on the Perseverance, now repaired and continuing toward its destination, Martinez returned to work. His arm was still in a support brace, and he moved a bit slower than before, but the engines needed fixing and he was the chief engineer. That meant work to do. The child he'd protected, whose name was Tommy, came by the engineering bay one afternoon. His mother waited at the door while the boy approached Martinez's workstation. In his hands was a drawing, carefully colored, showing a man standing between a monster and a small figure. "I made this for you," Tommy said shyly. Martinez took the drawing, looked at it for a long moment, then found some tape and stuck it to the wall above his main console. "Thank you. That's going to stay right there." "Are you still scared?" the boy asked. It was an honest question, and Martinez gave it the consideration it deserved. "Yeah, sometimes. I have bad dreams about what happened. But being scared doesn't mean you can't do what needs doing. It just means you're smart enough to understand the danger. You're really brave." "Now," Martinez ruffled the kid's hair gently. "I'm just a guy who fixes engines. But I'm a guy who fixes engines and doesn't let anything happen to kids if he can help it. That's just being human." Tommy hugged him then, quick and fierce, before running back to his mother. Martinez watched them go, feeling something warm in his chest that had nothing to do with his healing injuries. Throughout the galaxy, the story spread. The species that had viewed humans as soft, as prey, as easy targets began to reconsider. The phrase honey badger entered the galactic lexicon. It became a warning, a reminder. Humans are nice, don't